What's wrong with this two-party system is everything that we're seeing in our lives, especially young people who are basically the ultimate punching bag right now in this predatory economy. People need health care, but that shouldn't be on the backs of small businesses. Small businesses have been crushed. The Democrats are quaking in their boots that people should find out that they actually have an option like us that will meet their needs.
What do we actually have to do? What are the steps?
For starters, that's where the change begins.
Young and Profiters, welcome back to the show. And today we have a very different topic to cover. We're going to be going into politics. Now, I usually only like to talk about business and entrepreneurship and topics that stay in that lane. However, it is election year in America. And if you're anything like me, you're trying to study up on all the key issues. You're trying to figure out who you're going to vote for. And what better way to learn about all the key issues than by directly interviewing one of the candidates? Joining me on the show today is Dr. Jill Stein. Jill Stein is the Green Party presidential nominee. She's a Harvard-educated doctor. She's a political activist who has stood against racism, injustice. She stands for environmental reform, having a living wage, canceling student debt. She is for the people. Now, today's conversation is going to be very enlightening. We're going to learn about why the two-party system right now is actually threatening our democracy. We're going to talk about how America is the best democracy that money can buy, and how super PACs and AIPAC and lobbyists are really threatening our democracy and controlling policy right now. Can't wait to share this information with you all. Without further delay, here's my conversation with the incredible Dr. Jill Stein. Jill, welcome to Young and Profiting Podcast.
Thank you so much. Really great to be here.
I'm so excited for this episode. You know, I've never had a presidential candidate on this show before. We're a business show. We don't really talk politics, but our democracy and our presidential candidate has so much to do with our success as entrepreneurs and small business owners. So I can't wait to talk to you about how it impacts us as entrepreneurs and just as people in general. So I just want to sort of shed some foundation and context for my listeners. So it's July 23rd, 2024. A few days ago, Biden just announced that he's dropping out of the race and he's endorsing Kamala Harris to take the nomination. I believe that this doesn't change much. It's just a new figurehead, same policies, right? And I believe that a lot of people right now are feeling like they've just got to choose between two lesser evils. So why don't we start here? Talk to us about why America is not really a democracy right now and what's wrong with this two-party system.
You know, what's wrong with this two-party system is everything that we're seeing in our lives, you know, as people, especially young people, who are basically the latest victim of this predatory economy, which is always looking for its latest cash cow. And that's kind of what the younger generation is. It's a generation that's being exploited in the lack of decent jobs, in the complete lack of healthcare options, the lack of housing, the lack of transportation, the lack of a future by way of, you know, a climate we can survive in, you know, disastrous food, health statistics are absolutely going down the tubes. We're seeing rising cancer rates dramatically in young people right now at the same time that we do not have a healthcare system. But I mean, all else aside, we shouldn't be inflicting cancer and other, you know, chronic illnesses on young people to start with. I mean, it's like young people are sort of the ultimate punching bag right now in this predatory economy. And it's so outrageous, you know, as someone who's been an observer and really an activist for many generations now. I go way back really to the Vietnam War when I was in high school and fighting that, you know, and then sort of learning over the years about how we essentially have a war economy. It's been a longstanding economy for empire and oligarchy, and young people and people of color and marginalized communities are really the victims. And this is all kind of coming to a real crisis right now. So people have all-out crisis in their everyday lives. And we've had this crisis, whether it's been Democrats holding all three branches of government, the White House and both houses of Congress, or Republicans. They're all sort of marching to the right. We see the rich getting richer. We see 3 billionaires now having the wealth of the lower half of the economy altogether. And, the Democrats used to be called the lesser evil, but now they are the ones, under Joe Biden, but not just Biden. It's really almost all of them, with very few exceptions, who've been leading the charge now on genocide, on war that's really hot wars in two areas around the world, and heading for a third with China, heading towards nuclear conflict. This is all exploding, and it's off the radar, so to speak, because people, were pretty riveted with the genocide, which should be front and center. But now, there's all this chaos in our elections between the near assassination of Donald Trump, which is kind of just a reflection of how violence racks our entire society. And just because you're in the upper echelons doesn't mean you're going to be protected from it. There was that, really horrific thing. And then, all the chaos with Joe Biden basically having been protected for years, that he's been in cognitive decline, but certainly for the last 1 to 2 years. There have been basically circles around him to protect him and to prevent, any debates whatsoever from happening in the Democratic primary, to prevent any real primary from happening at all. And this kind of exploded in a real, crisis that is not over yet, because there's going to be contention within the Democratic Party about whether there will be an open convention or not. And, they're trying to circle the wagons around Kamala Harris, but let's remember, she's been there along at Joe Biden's side with all of the policies, and there was one promise that Joe Biden fulfilled, and that was that nothing will change. He promised that to Wall Street, that nothing will change. And that is true. If anything, billionaires have gotten markedly richer over the course of the last several years, and how the COVID crisis was handled. It was handled in a way that devastated small businesses, devastated communities of color. And before that, you had the Wall Street meltdown, which was really designed by the Democratic Party, was brought to us by Democrats under Clinton, and policies that they reversed under Clinton. And then Barack Obama appointed Larry Summers to head his Treasury Department, Larry Summers, who oversaw the rollback of these protections that had come out of the prior Depression. That was reversed under Democrats. And then he was appointed under Obama, and they proceeded to bail out Wall Street and throw out 7 or 8 million homeowners. That's why the Democrats really got severely punished. And, you began to see everyday working people embrace, Trumpism and Republicanism, not because they liked it, but because they were so furious at betrayal by the Democrats. So that's where we're left right now, with two greater evil parties, as far as I'm concerned. We need to forget the lesser evil and fight for the greater good. The Greens, are standing up for exactly that.
Yeah, I can't wait to know all the issues that you stand for and the way that you want to change America. But first, let's talk about the fact that there's not many people that actually identify as Republican or Democrat, right? It's just a little bit over 50% of people are either Democrats or Republican. And then there's 50% of us that want another solution. So what is the other solution to Republican or Democrat?
Yes. And let me add to that it's about 50% who do not identify as either Democrat or Republican. But polls actually show that it's more than that. It's almost 2/3 that say they want another choice. They want another independent political party, because the two that we've got, which are bought and paid for basically by Wall Street and the war machine, they've done such an awful job of serving everyday people. So yes, absolutely. Greens are the alternative that is of, by, and for the people. We don't take the corrupting money that the other parties live on. So we don't take corporate money. We don't take, large contributions actually from anybody. We do not work with super PACs. We don't accept money from corporate PACs. We don't take dark money. We don't use any of these loopholes that like victory funds and things like that you probably haven't heard of. But now victory funds will allow a single donor to write a check for over $1 million. So with one pop, one person has huge influence. And it's that kind of money comes with strings attached, even though they're not explicit, even if it's not a quid pro quo. It's human not to bite the hand that feeds you. And if you have hands that are feeding you, that are showering you in cash, it's very hard not to want to please them and to pay them back. That's just human nature. It's human nature to be corruptible. That's why we need protections built into the system. And so Greens don't take the money. We want a system that also refuses that money, that instead provides public financing for candidates who qualify. And you have to show that you actually are a real force, that you have public support, that you are truly a candidate, and there are many ways that can be shown. In my home state, in Massachusetts, we adopted such a system. It has a name. It's called Clean Elections because it lets you set that dirty money aside, the money that comes with strings attached. Clean Elections, and we had to qualify for it by collecting a lot of very small contributions, like $5 contributions. I forget what the number was. This was back in the year 2002. Actually, it was even before that we had passed it. We had passed it in the later 90s. And we passed it by a voter referendum because, of course, in the legislatures, they don't want to touch it because they want their cozy deals to keep going and the advantage that they have getting big money. So they don't want to rock the boat here. We passed it as a voter referendum, which is usually how it gets passed, by a huge margin, by a 2-to-1 margin. The people in my home state passed Clean Elections. And we began to use it, and then the legislature, our overwhelmingly progressive Democrat, so-called progressive Democratic legislature, repealed Clean Elections on a voice vote. They basically threw it in the trash and prevented, their competition from having a leg to stand on. The state of Maine has adopted it, and one or two others. So, this exists. It's tested. It works really well. But it's the alternative that the powers that be do not want to talk about. But that is the most critical thing. And there are other reforms that must go along with it because one silver bullet, there is no silver bullet to restore democracy. But there are critical things that need to be done. And that is, I think, the very most critical. We have a tiny public financing system here at the national level. And you have to qualify for it, which we did. And then they decided they weren't going to give us the money. They owe us almost $300,000, which we've been using to get on the ballot. And they're basically hijacking our ballot drive here by holding that money. And I want to encourage anybody who is able to, whatever you can throw into the pot, if you want a democracy here, if you want the only anti-genocide, anti-war, pro-worker, pro-small business campaign out there, we're already on the ballot for a majority of voters, but we need to be on the ballot for all voters to really be taken seriously and to truly contest for power. And we can talk more about that. But that can really happen in this election. We need to be on the ballot. They're holding up our public funding right now. By getting on the ballot, we make it really clear we're not just a token campaign. We're not a symbolic campaign. We are truly challenging empire and oligarchy and this corporate-dominated economy that shuts out everyday communities and small businesses and worker cooperatives and the things that we need for a really vibrant economy. This is all tied together, and we need public funding now, and we need a real choice of candidates on the ballot.
Amazing. Okay, so there's some things that I want to kind of just dive deeper on about what you just said. So first of all, let's talk about how we have the best democracy that money can buy. Okay, something that I hear you say all the time, right? Best democracy that money can buy. You mentioned super PACs, you mentioned company PACs. We've got AIPAC, of course. And we've got the 1%ers, right? The billionaires who just, like you just mentioned, are allowed to just like donate huge amounts of money. And even just one person can have this incredible impact on policy.
Yes.
So talk to us about that. Like break that down for us, because a lot of the people listening are not really following politics. They're probably in that 50% that don't identify with anything and just don't know what to do to make the country a better place for them as entrepreneurs and just people. So talk to us about that.
Money buys influence. And in our economy, money is so concentrated in the top, in powerful corporations and billionaires, and the financial industries. And, all these kind of, we have a financialized economy also, which takes the economy out of the hands of our communities and our small businesses. It's all run at this very high level where you can't even understand what's going on, let alone, have a role in it. So, this is why we need a government that's working for us. But when it's paid for, when the campaigns are paid for by powerful donors who are representing powerful special interests, whether it's, big tech, whether it's the health insurance industry, the war contractors, AIPAC, groups that have a special interest, like AIPAC is spending $100 million in this election to basically buy out candidates that stand up against genocide, that stand up for human rights and for Palestinian rights. Many of them are defeated. Not all of them. Summer Lee was not defeated. But most of the time AIPAC gets its way because it buys its way. So, that's a really compelling illustration. Here's another illustration. Donald Trump got together with the fossil fuel industry, and he basically said to the executives, give me $1 billion and then let's talk about what you need. Basically offering a quid pro quo. You give me the money and your money will buy you the policies that you want. That means that we get more of what we've been getting. There's a famous study by two authors called Gillens and Page. And this was done about 12 years ago, but nothing has changed here. And they looked at what policies are passed by Congress, what things get passed, say like the Affordable Care Act, when what people really wanted was health insurance as a human right for everyone in a very cost-effective way that saves businesses, especially small businesses, from this horrible burden of having to carry, the weight of healthcare, providing healthcare. It's enough to crush any and every small business and even not such small businesses. But the thing is, this healthcare system that we have wastes $1 out of every $3. The overhead is 33% because there's all this duplication and tracking. The problem is $1 out of every $3 is not going for healthcare within the system. $1 every $3 is spent tracking. Did you have a Band-Aid put on at the hospital? What kind of Band-Aid was it? How much did that Band-Aid cost? Which out of 1,000 health insurance plans do you have? And does your health insurance plan cover Band-Aids? And does it cover that kind of a Band-Aid? This is where our money is going in healthcare. And countries like Canada and most developed nations around the world, they've just kind of simplified the insurance so that there's just one insurer, like in Medicare. Medicare, unfortunately, is being privatized, so there are a lot of holes being knocked in Medicare. But before it was privatized, it was just one simple quasi-governmental insurer. Same healthcare system. In fact, it's a better healthcare system because it allows you to actually choose your provider instead of what we have right now, which are these very narrow networks that tell you who you can go to, and they may change your provider, and they tell you which hospital you can go to, and you get hit really hard if you go outside of their narrow networks. Well, under a Medicare for All plan, you're covered everywhere. Your healthcare is your choice, and it's between you and your healthcare provider. And it cuts the cost because of all this waste. And so then we get to a system where you get to have complete coverage. So it's like your dental care, it's your eyeglasses, your contacts, your hearing aid, your mental health, your reproductive health, everything, your chronic care. If your parents, are sick and they need to be at home, well, guess what? That's covered. Now it's not at all. You have to go in poverty for that. Everything is covered. So we can expand healthcare to cover everyone and to make coverage complete. You don't have to have a job. You can afford to say, oh, this job is terrible. I don't have to keep it because I'm desperate. You can actually change jobs. And it takes the burden off of small businesses that no longer have to provide healthcare. So it does all of that. And it saves us over $500 billion a year because of the waste that gets cut out. So these are the kinds of policies that we can stand up for as Greens because we don't take the big money. We are not bribed. The health insurance industry and big pharma, when this was being decided, when the Affordable Care Act was being created, those industries poured money through lobbyists and through campaign contributions to basically remove the Medicare for All system as a contender. And they promised, oh, we'll have a public option, but they've never fulfilled that promise. And the public option will not be an affordable option because it doesn't have the economy of scale. So, this is another example of how money talks. And what these guys who did this study, Gillens and Page, found was that there is a zero relationship between what the public wants and what the public needs and what Congress actually passes, because that agenda is determined by big money. So how we get the money out and get the people back in to our political system is, above all, it's through bringing back public financing.
Yeah, fam, I'm not a finance person. I'm a make money person. I love to innovate, create, and sell. I don't like to do the boring finance stuff. So I've offloaded all those responsibilities to my business partner. And so I basically handed a mess over to him. He inherited a lot of different apps, and he would always complain about all these disparate apps. And so we were looking for a more streamlined solution where all of our banking and bookkeeping would be in one place. And we found that with Found. Yes, it's called Found, which is very fitting. Found is a banking and bookkeeping app that is especially made for solopreneurs and entrepreneurs. It's made for us. And Found has amazing features. You can do everything from invoicing to bookkeeping to tax planning. One of my favorite features on Found is that it will actually automatically estimate the taxes that you owe and then set aside money for that. This is so important because oftentimes you spend your tax money unknowingly and then you're hit with a bill, and that ain't pretty. In addition to that cool feature, one of my other favorite features is the fact that you can create virtual cards and then set spending limits on them. Now we have virtual cards that we're able to give out to our employees. There's no way they can overspend. Found is super cost effective. There's no hidden charges and there's no minimum balances. Plus, it's everything in one app. So that in itself is a lot of cost savings. You can save hundreds or even thousands of dollars by switching everything to Found. If you want to try it for free, that's right. You can try it for free at found.com/profiting. That's FOUND.com/profiting, found.com/profiting to try Found for free. Found is a financial technology company, not a bank. Banking services are provided by Piermont Bank, member FDIC. Found's core features are free. They also offer an optional paid product, Found Plus. Like I mentioned, I feel like a lot of my listeners aren't very political, right? They might not know what AIPAC even is. So AIPAC is, I guess you could describe it as the Israel lobby, right? Can you talk about what kind of benefits Israelis enjoy compared to Americans? And why we basically have Israel's best interests at heart instead of America's best interests at heart in a lot of our policies.
So the U.S. is providing almost $4 billion a year, largely for the military budget for Israel. But because then Israel doesn't have to provide its own budget and also doesn't have to develop relationships with its neighbors. It can be abusive of its neighbors because it has the empire behind it and all this money and the force of the U.S. military and all the U.S. weapons. But we're basically providing almost $4 billion a year for Israel so that Israel in turn can provide healthcare for everyone, at least for Jewish Israelis. And now Israel has basically passed policies so that if you are not Jewish, I mean, it's a very explicit ethno-nationalist state, and it's a religious state, and you now have to be Jewish and, to qualify for most benefits in Israel. And, it's widely known that Israel is an apartheid state.
Yeah.
And people from South Africa will tell you that it's actually a much more vicious apartheid state than even South Africa was. But part of that is that there are all these benefits that are given to full citizens who must be Jewish. And that includes health care. It also includes housing for a lot of people. It also includes education. So, they're living, in a sort of democratic socialist society if you happen to be of the correct ethnic and religious background, which is horrible. I mean, that's virtually a fascist state that Israel has become. So why are we, our latest package was something like $24 billion for Israel. And most of that was military, not all of it. But we're providing $24 billion, yet we could not extend the most important thing that was done in the last 4 years, which was the child tax deduction, the child tax credit that cut poverty levels for children in this country by 50%. Our government wouldn't do that because we were too busy basically, funding genocide against babies in Palestine and providing, a really secure and, beneficial way of life for the people of Israel. So this is not okay. We need to ensure that there is peace and security for everybody, in the region, and that means for Palestine as well.
Yeah. So earlier, this kind of brings us back to something that you were saying earlier, that we have like a war economy. We have a war. I don't know what you called it, a war democracy or something like that. Can you talk to us about how politicians supporting war actually helps politicians be corrupt and make money off the war machine?
Yes. So let me also include one other really important piece of background here, which is that half of our congressional budget is spent on the war machine. Half of it. So this is like $1 trillion a year that is spent just on the war machine and, subsidies and so on. So this is huge, and that impoverishes us here. So there's a direct connection between this massive war machine and the fact that we don't have adequate health care and housing and education and, coping with the climate crisis. We don't have that in this country because we're too busy funding war. And, and so when we fund war, about half of that money is going to the war corporations, the military industrial complex. That's about half of our expenditures are going directly into corporations whose profits have just skyrocketed, since, this era of the war in Ukraine and the war on Gaza. So this is a massive military machine which costs us, benefits the war contractors, and they in turn are donating to the political campaigns of the politicians who do their bidding. So it's a very, it's like sometimes it's called like a self-licking ice cream cone. The benefits just make the problem worse, and it becomes this vicious cycle. We were warned about this by President Dwight Eisenhower back in the 1950s that we were basically creating this military-industrial complex that would take on a life of its own, where the corporations that benefit, that profit, are now linked to the politicians and make their campaigns strong because they give them a lot of money. So the politicians, in turn, are rewarding the war machine, and around it goes. So we have to break this cycle, and it's not hard to do that. It's not hard to do that because the American people are outraged about this genocide. Most Americans don't even know that the cost of this war in the last year has actually been $12,000 per household is the average cost, and it's been $55,000 since the first 9/11 wars began with the Afghanistan, with the invasion of Afghanistan and then Iraq. It amounts to about $55,000 per household that we have spent over the course of the past 2 decades. So it's absolutely staggering. This is impoverishing us, as well as endangering the whole world by this, race towards World War III.
So scary. And I know that we can change this. So I want to take a moment and help people understand, like, what can we do as people who can vote, who can use our voting rights? How do we get the Green Party on the ballot? Do we need to sign up to be a part of the Green Party? What do we actually have to do? What are the steps?
So,
young and profiters, I love being an entrepreneur, but I hate the hiring process. And if you do it wrong, it's a real big burden because you're going to have to hire and then fire. It's bad for company culture. It is just a nightmare. You need a good hiring tool and you need a good hiring process internally. And when it comes to a tool, nobody is better than Indeed. That's what we use at Yap Media. Indeed is your all-in-one solution for hiring. Indeed is where all the top A players are looking for a job. It's the most popular hiring platform. It's the most user-friendly. It's way better than having to sift through a million resumes and waste your time. And I love that Indeed's matching engine actually gets better as you use it. It starts to learn your own preferences and what you're looking for. So if you want to give Indeed a try and find your next A player, if you want to stop pouring money down the drain by DIYing your hiring, then start using Indeed. You can get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/profiting. Support the show by letting them know that you found them on Young and Profiting Podcast. Again, you can go to Indeed.com/profiting for a $75 sponsored job credit. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
For starters, you don't have to think about parties at this point. You can just think about what campaign is speaking for you. And because you can vote regardless of party. Parties only matter if you're voting in a primary, but primaries basically, the primary voting is largely over. Now it's about getting a candidate that represents you that can truly contest for power, not just a symbolic campaign, but a campaign that can actually challenge empire and oligarchy and genocide. Our campaign is the only campaign which is anti-war, pro-working people, pro-small business, pro-climate emergency action, anti-genocide. We are the only such campaign that's already on the ballot for a majority of voters. So there are some other campaigns with a very similar agenda. Claudia de la Cruz with the Party of Socialism and Labor, Cornel West, who's running as an independent. We have very similar agendas, but we are the only campaign that is already on the ballot for a majority of voters, has a pathway to be on the ballot for all voters. So we actually are challenging empire. We've done this before. We know how to do it. We've been ahead of the curve, and the curve has caught up to us on militarism, on the climate, on healthcare, you name it. So we encourage you to go to our website, and you can do everything you need to do from there. The website is jillstein2024.com. If you go to the website, you can sign up to get the newsletter, for one thing. You can make a contribution if you're able to throw something into the hat. And contributions of any size are just absolutely a game changer. And then you can go to the ballot access dropdown up on the right at the top. Click on ballot access and you'll see a map. You can go to your state and find out, do you already have a choice? Are we already on the ballot in your state? Or do you have a ballot drive that's going on right now? And you'll see, and if you have a ballot drive going on now, then you just get the contact person from that little box that pops up and let them know that you'd like to help. And, it may be carrying a petition, which is simple to do. It's basically like talking to your friends and neighbors and saying, do you want to sign to get another choice on the ballot? Do you want to sign to get an anti-genocide choice on the ballot? Do you want to sign to get affordable housing on the ballot or healthcare as a human right? Whatever resonates in your community, ask people if they want that, and overwhelmingly people will sign. And we also provide support about how to do it. Most of the petitions are right there on the website, so you can just download them, as well as instructions and a video. It's pretty straightforward, common sense. It's like they put their full name, they put their address, and they may or may not need to say what town they're in, and so on. And so there are a few rules like that for collecting signatures, but it's very common sense. It's not rocket science, and there's a lot of help to get it done. That and making a contribution if you can't collect, or you could do both. They're both just totally game changers. And that's how we get on the ballot and force the issue. Because if the American people have a voice in this, we overwhelmingly want to cut the military budget. People want to have healthcare and housing and quality schools and all that. So we are the agenda of everyday people who are being thrown under the bus. We are about bailing out students and canceling student debt. We are about free public higher education. It should be free. Back in my day, it was free, and it should continue to be free. So we're about all the things that people are really screaming for. We're actually doing it. We have a program to get it done, and it's all about our forcing our way into this conversation, because the political elites want to shut down this conversation. They do not want to have people who are actually meeting the needs that people are screaming about out there. The Democrats are really quaking in their boots that people should find out that they actually have an option like us that will meet their needs.
It's so true. Like, I feel like they try to hide the Green Party from everyone, and they try to guilt everyone saying that if you vote for Green Party, you're voting for Trump. But that's not true at all. I'm going to do everything in my power to get the word out. We'll put all these links in the show notes. I'm one of the biggest influencers on LinkedIn. I'm going to post about it all the time and try to get people to help get you on the ballot in their state. If you're not, to know that they're going to vote for you, to spread the message. And I'm just going to help any way that I can. I'm Palestinian and 100% Palestinian. And so for me, the fact that you are anti-genocide, you're the only anti-genocide choice. And then on top of that, you care about things like climate change and a livable wage and protecting small business even. And I'd love to kind of go into some of your other issues, and maybe we can circle back to Israel if we have time, because I do think it's a huge issue that people need to know about. So this is an entrepreneurship show. I've got a lot of people in their 20s and 30s listening. What do they need to know about the economy and where it's headed right now? And some of the things that you hope to do if you were to be president to help change our economy and make it better for young people, especially millennials, Gen Z.
So we have an economy that's working for the economic elites. It's working for big investors. The stock market is still, off the charts. It may be precarious, but for now, everybody's living it up. And, there are many long-term threats to the U.S. economy. Including the national debt, but also including the status of the dollar as international currency. So there are all these threats that need to be dealt with on many levels. And we don't do ourselves any favor by being at war with the rest of the world. Suffice it to say, we need to repair our international relations if we want to have an economy in the future as well. But looking at stuff closer to home, we need to have an economy that works for everyday people. And, we need to have small businesses, which are really the backbone of our economy. And small businesses have been crushed over the last 1 to 2 decades. Small businesses are a smaller and smaller piece of our economy. Yet this is where the creativity and the energy and the dynamism of the economy is. So we have to bring back small businesses. We have to make loans and support available to small businesses. And we have to get the burden of healthcare off the back of small businesses. People need healthcare, but that shouldn't be on the backs of small businesses at the outrageous cost that healthcare costs us nowadays. So we will take healthcare entirely out of the picture here. This should be provided, and we're saving $500 billion while we provide quality healthcare for everyone. So that's a win-win. We also need to provide affordable housing, because right now, up to half of all Americans are really precarious in their housing right now and are paying up to 50% of their monthly income to keep a roof over their heads for their rent or their mortgage. And young people can't afford mortgages now.
Yep.
And the housing stock has been bought up basically by the private equity firms, by the big investors who are now gobbling up all the housing. So you get inflation, especially in housing, which has been off the charts. You get inflation when you have more money and fewer things to buy. That's like the general
Recipe.
yes, that is the recipe. Thank you. That's the recipe for inflation. So there are many ways to work with that, but you don't want to work with that by cutting jobs and forcing unemployment. It's like no. We need our small businesses to be employing people. We need, we need for workers, especially in larger companies, to be getting good, solid living wages so they can afford to be the pump. The pump for our economy is consumer expenditures. So consumers need to have enough money, which is why we need a true living wage as the minimum wage. Now, there may be some requirements for the size of the businesses there to have that applied, but working people need not only healthcare, working people need good wages. And to survive throughout most of the country, you need at least a $20 an hour minimum wage. So by doing all those things, we help revive the economy. Our Green New Deal will also help revive the economy because the Green New Deal means we basically declare that there is a climate emergency, which is one of the major reasons for hopelessness among young people. Half of young people describe themselves as hopeless in polls. And a lot of that is because people really feel like they've been abandoned on student debt and all the rest, but also on the climate and the climate future. So the Green New Deal.
Young and profiters, there is no better time to start a business. There's no better time to be an entrepreneur. You just need a good idea, and then you need to open up shop. And if you want to open up shop, the number one solution is Shopify. Shopify is the all-in-one global commerce platform that allows you to start, run, and grow your business. Shopify will scale with you the whole way. They're responsible for huge multi-million, billion-dollar brands like Allbirds, Rothy's, Brooklyn, and Thrive Cosmetics. These all started as Shopify startups and then expanded into retail, expanded and scaled. I interviewed a lot of these entrepreneurs and heard it from them firsthand. Shopify is an amazing platform to start your business, whether you're selling candles or courses like I do. I do all my course sales, my mastermind subscription. I do it on Shopify. We can do promo codes and I integrate my email campaigns and they've got amazing analytics. Literally anything you need to market and sell your product, you can do it with a couple clicks on Shopify. You don't need to be tech savvy. You can focus on what you're good at and then let Shopify enable all the tech stuff so you can just get your core skills done. It's no wonder 10% of all e-commerce is run on Shopify. If you want to give Shopify a try, sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/profiting. Again, that's shopify.com/profiting, all lowercase for a $1 per month trial period. That's shopify.com/profiting. And I want to hear how you guys opened up shop on Shopify.
So the Green New Deal gets rid of that hopelessness because we jump in full bore. Number one, we say this is an emergency and the core driver of the climate crisis is fossil fuels. So while the Democrats they give lip service to our plans, they don't actually do what it takes. So they do not have a plan for phasing out fossil fuels. They just want to create more renewables. And that's great, but nature doesn't care about that, and the climate doesn't care about that. That doesn't do squat for addressing the problem. We're still going to have rapidly escalating heat waves, drought, rising sea levels, storms, you name it. All the things that people are taking on the chin right now are going to keep happening under the Democrats' plan, just like the Republicans' plan, because the Democrats, under both Obama and under Biden, the U.S. Fossil fuels have skyrocketed, and we've become the major producer of fossil fuels. So let's be the major producer of renewables, and we can do that at a community level as well. There are all sorts of small businesses that are badly needed to create this transition at the community level. So that's things like renovating our housing and making it energy efficient and very low energy and have all the principles of conservation. So there's lots of housing rehab as well as housing to be built. There's also a lot of transportation work to be done. We need local sustainable transportation. We need muscle-powered transit. And we need communities that are really built around preserving open space. And if we're building housing, which is linked with public transportation, and it's built in an environmentally sound way, we're not gobbling up our open space. We're protecting our open space because green space is actually really important to our health, let alone to the health of our water system and all the rest. Part of the Green New Deal is also farming and bringing back small farming and the farming economy and the community farming economy and all that, which happens, at a small scale, which is coordinated, but it needs, lots of small producers and providers and distributors and all that. So the Green New Deal is also a boon for, for small businesses and for reviving our economy. And then, the housing piece, I think we've addressed as part of that. But those are really kind of the fundamentals here of creating an economy, which is, again, becomes a productive economy. Right now, it's a financialized economy. So it's all in the hands of Wall Street and the, big real estate and, industries like that, which are not small businesses. They're very oppressive to small businesses.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so important what you're saying because you mentioned you have a quote where you say that climate change is even a bigger threat to us than World War III, right? A lot of us are worried about war, but we've got this whole other thing that's going on that basically our politicians are doing nothing about. And in fact, they're funding war, which creates so much pollution, which makes the climate issue even worse. So it's just so ridiculous. We just live in a country where it seems like their priority is just war and staying in power and getting the money back from the war machine. And then all the regular citizens are kind of just, our lives are sort of deteriorating here in America.
In a big way, really fast. And I don't know if I mentioned this before, but as part of that same poll that shows half of people under 25 are hopeless about the future, 1/4 of young people have contemplated harming themselves within 2 weeks of the poll. Things are that dire for young people, and they certainly are because young people have been exploited at every turn in this predatory economy that's serving the very rich and making billionaires and large corporations richer all the time, while for everyday people, it's such a struggle just to get through a day. And it doesn't have to be that way. We have the resources. What we don't have is the economy and the democracy that will create the economy and all the other critical pieces of an infrastructure for a world that's actually working for us. And just to emphasize how much this really is within our reach, I want to share one other little factoid with you, and that is that we have 3 candidates who are pro-genocide, pro-war, anti, everyday people, anti-working people and small businesses. That's RFK and formerly Biden, but now Kamala Harris, it looks like, and Donald Trump. So they will effectively be splitting the pro-war, pro-genocide vote.
Yep.
They're all pretty substantial campaigns. They are going to split that vote. If we can break into the public dialogue, which is starting to happen, especially through social media, through, through commentators like yourself, drivers like yourself, which are basically liberating our right to a free press, are creating the free press that we otherwise don't have. By getting the word out, we can break into this conversation. And also by getting on the ballot, we force the mainstream media to pay attention to us because they use the fact that we're not on everywhere to sideline us and to marginalize us. But once we're on in just about all states, they can't do that. So by pushing our ballot access, we then force our way into this conversation. So where you have three campaigns splitting the pro-war, pro-genocide vote, we become the one and only anti-war, anti-genocide, pro-working people, pro-small business, pro-climate action. We become the one unifying campaign. So when you have four choices in a race, four people, four campaigns who are dividing the vote, you can win that race with as little as 26%. 26 can dominate, and the others have either 25 or 24%, or some variation on that. But one campaign can win with as little as 26%. According to a poll released just yesterday, it said we were at 4%. Now, this is before we've had any coverage whatsoever. We've had polls like in Wisconsin, for example, where we've had a little bit of coverage where we were running 22%. And it's a range. It may be from 8% up to 22% among people age 35 and under. So where word starts to get out, and that's mostly among young people who are always leading the charge, who are always kind of setting the trend, that's where the change begins. And by alerting young people that there is a campaign that is about you, that you can take this election by storm. 44 million people who are in student debt right now, knowing that your student debt will be canceled, that alone, that 44 million alone is enough to win this race, a four-way race. So we really encourage people to reject this propaganda of powerlessness, this propaganda that tells you that there is no alternative, that, you're going down with the ship here. No, that's absolutely false. We can be masters of our own fate here. As Frederick Douglass said, the famous abolitionist, slavery abolitionist, what he said, this famous quote you'll hear all the time: power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has and it never will. And he said this back in the days of fighting slavery, which was a very big institution to fight. He was really encouraging people that we have to be political. We have to really challenge power. You can't do this by being the lesser evil, by allowing yourself to be veiled in what you think might be the least worst. No, we have to stand up for what it is that we actually want, need, and deserve. The other quote is from the amazing author and poet Alice Walker, also famous Palestinian human rights advocate for a long time. And what she said, this is paraphrasing her a little bit, but this is basically what she said: the biggest way people give up power is by not knowing we have it to start with. And I just want to drive that home. We have the power. The minute we flick the switch in our own minds from being powerless to being powerful, the minute we decide that we are going to act on the courage of our convictions and on this moral imperative that we have in this day and age of genocide on our computer screens and our iPhones, the minute we decide to act, we have the numbers that we need. Just from students fighting debt, from people who already oppose the genocide, just from people who need housing, to keep a roof over their heads. You start putting us together and we are absolutely unstoppable. And, there are more to our plans in particular about how we get from here to there. But just that as the general notion that it is our power that can take us to an actual victory in this election.
So, Jill, I want to be respectful of your time. I know that you don't have that much more time with us. I usually ask 2 questions at the end of my show, but I'm going to customize one of the questions for today's episode. So I usually say, what is one actionable thing that our young and profiters can do to become more profitable tomorrow? Today, I'm going to say, what is one action our young and profiters can do to help put you in power?
Oh, man, thank you for asking that, because that really is the answer to being more profitable, is having a democracy that's actually working for you. Young people are the drivers of our economy and our society. So we really do need to put you front and center. And that's what our campaign has always been about. So for you to help us help you and empower you, go to JillStein2024.com. If you can make a contribution, throw something into the hat of any size whatsoever, sign up to volunteer or to just be on our email list and make this, join this team. This team is of, by, and for the people, and that means you. And by joining this team, we become unstoppable together.
Jill, what is your Instagram? How can people follow you on Instagram?
So it is at Dr. Jill Stein, at Dr. Jill Stein.
Okay, we're going to put all those links in the show notes, guys. Follow her on social media. Share all her content to your stories. Are you on TikTok, Jill?
Yes.
Okay, so is it Dr. Jill Stein on TikTok?
I believe so, but I'll double check.
Yeah, I'll put I'll make sure my team puts all the correct social links on there. Guys, follow Jill on social media, share her content, tell your coworkers about her, post about it at school if you guys are still in college. Like, just tell your whole networks about Jill and the Green Party and help educate people. Join me along this journey. I'm going to be talking a lot about it on social media and so on. Jill, thank you so much for your time and for joining us on Young and Profiting Podcast.
Really great to be with you, Hala, and I look forward to the next installment. Thank you so very much.